Our guest today has been witness to that, Representative Dan Webster from U.S. House District 11. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Great to be on.
Okay, so I'm just going to get right to it. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid right off. I think it's the question on the minds of so many voters. What is happening in Washington, D.C. right now? You're in the middle of it all.
Yes, I am. Some days it's good, some days not so good, but I think it's a picture of maybe just the way it works, and it's maybe a little more highlighted than it has been in the past. We are doing a lot of major issues which are undoing a lot of things that happened in the 8 years previous, and all of that produces growing pains.
Well, when you watch TV and you watch the press briefing, you know, Sean Spicer and other folks who are very colorful within the administration, you know, scratch your head and go, wow, this is really different than anything I've seen before, Republican or Democrat.
It is different, so no doubt about that. I mean, but the exciting thing is I walk into the chamber every day, and for 6 years I knew that what we were voting on, the likelihood of it becoming a law was pretty much nil. However, now when I go into the chamber and I vote on something, I at least have a suspicion it might make it to the president's desk and he might sign it and it might become law. That to me is a little more exciting than knowing that it's dead on arrival.
Congressman, perfect segue. Let's go ahead and talk about the GOP's rallying cry, repeal and replace Obamacare. So now we have the AHCA, otherwise known as Trump Care, versus Obamacare. So let me get this straight. You finally voted yes, but you were actually, the first go around, you were thinking you were going to vote no. What made you change your mind?
I was working on an issue that is, I think, Florida specific. It has to do with Medicaid-funded nursing home beds. We have more growth than anybody else in the 55 and up range. People move here. They like our sunshine, and they like the fact that we have no income tax. Therefore, they stay. They're not going back to Pennsylvania. So they're going to be here when they pass away. And when they do, many of them go into nursing homes some way. First assisted living, then a nursing home, then maybe memory care, which is an expensive thing. And the state pays part of that bill. It's all done under Medicaid. At least 70% of them will be in a Medicaid-funded bed.
So that was the breaker for you to say we need this money in Florida for these beds, and who told you yes?
Actually, I got a yes from the president, the vice president, the secretary of HHS, and the CMS director, Paul Ryan, and the rest of the leadership.
So you met with them and they said yes to you?
It took a while, yes.
Wow, that's pretty impressive to hear that you actually met with them. You know, the president has said some things recently, and then he would just flip the script and say something completely different. Do you think he'll keep his word?
Absolutely. I am confident he will, and I got the assurances of just about everybody down the chain.
I've got so many things to get to, Syria and some of the other things, but I want to ask you one more thing about the Trump Care versus Obamacare. One of the sticking points that a lot of folks have been talking about is pre-existing conditions. So under the AHCA, pre-existing conditions, it gets very confusing compared to the Obamacare. Can you clear up some of the misconceptions?
I can. There is a guarantee issue. That means whatever condition you might have, you might have in the future, is covered. You can get coverage no matter what.
Isn't it up to the states, though, to drop you if they wanted to or not?
No, what's in this bill is the fact that there's going to be coverage for every person. Now, a lot of the things that are in or out of that bill, that's going to remain something that you can purchase, and so you'll be able to get the care you need from the doctor you choose at a price you can afford, period. That's it, no matter who you are.
One of the things, too, that the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, had said with the projections, and I'm talking about the first version from back in March, was that 24 million people would be without health coverage by 2026. That is a really slap in the face for so many folks looking at the big picture. Do you think the CBO at some point will update their projections in a way that will be more favorable for the idea that the Republicans have for medical coverage for Americans?
Well, I think they will update their projections because the bill's changed since they did that. However, there's more to that than in that there are a lot of people that lost their care under Obamacare, but they got care under Obamacare. So losing your care doesn't mean you'll never get it again. It means you're going to drop what you have and get something new. And I think that's how it's a little bit misleading misleading to say that they lost it. People that were had maybe a care at work under Obamacare, but they qualified for Medicare, they were automatically put on Medicare. So they lost the coverage they had, they got new coverage.
Another big deal, FBI Director James Comey fired by President Trump. What was the talk like on the Hill after it all went down?
Well, I think it's kind of a strange situation because almost everybody there, you can play a clip of someone and they will have disliked him immensely, and then other times they have loved him. So if you just look at the campaign, along comes Bill Clinton meeting the Attorney General on the tarmac, and all of a sudden Comey drops the charges against her, and the Democrats loved him and the Republicans hated him. Then go along a little further and he picks up on Anthony Weiner and the things found on his computer, and he picks up the charge again, and the Democrats now hate him and the Republicans love him. And and then you go again, and so you've got almost every person in leadership saying something very nice about him and something very unkind. He was like a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, it's I think we've all gotten used to expect the unexpected. Let's talk about Syria if we can, Congressman. President Trump's response to Syria and the president there, Bashar al-Assad, using chemical weapons on their own people. So President Trump ordered airstrikes. Your thoughts on that whole development?
I think there's a time when you draw a line in the sand and you got to back it up. And when you have such a violation of human rights in that you would kill your own people with chemical warfare, masses of people with no discretion between whether or not they were civilians or young or old or whatever, I think someone has to say something. I think the United States said something.
What's different than when we saw videos of similar images under President Obama's tenure?
It almost happened then. His advisors, who are now relieved because they have now come out and said, we're glad this happened, this is what we urged him to do. It came within a day or two of the same exact scenario with the same exact results that would have happened, and they just didn't pull the trigger.
We've heard President Trump is open to the idea of opening up offshore oil drilling along the coast of the U.S. Presumably, we're talking about the state of Florida. Is that something that you would support? I'm
not for drilling in the Gulf. We have lines. There's an agreement. It's done, and that's it. I don't think we should do any more. Atlantic's different.
Fracking. I had a chance recently to speak in Washington, D.C. With the head of the EPA, and we were talking about fracking possibly causing earthquakes. We talked about Oklahoma. Is fracking a concern here in Florida?
No, it's not.
Do you support it?
I do.
Okay. We'll revisit that, I'm sure, at a later date. I want to close the interview with a bill in committee, the NIST Small Business Cybersecurity Act of 2017. It's your bill. Where does it stand right now?
Well, most people think when they think about hacking and getting into records, you hear the big stories about the big companies and banks and others who have been hacked. And nobody thinks about the fact that small businesses, as a matter of fact, small businesses don't even think, well, I'm not going to be hacked. I only have a few customers and it's not really happening. Well, what they're doing now, and it happened to my business, my small business, my sons came in, this is like 3 or 4 months ago, and there's a message on the screen. It just says, you've been hacked, your data is frozen, we own it, and pay us this amount of money or we're going to destroy it. Period.
So what does this do?
So I didn't do it. I went through some, I got a tech person to come in and fix it for me, but it was a long, drawn-out process. What this does is give the same information that is voluntary, but we give it, that we're giving to big businesses. Now there will be a small business division where they're going to be giving this information of how you can avoid those kind of things that happen to my business.
Fascinating stuff, because you can now relate to what some of the folks are dealing with.
Yes, I was shocked.
We've done a lot of stories about
I just never had thought about
Florida.
it before.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, Representative Dan Webster, giving us an update of what's happening up in Washington.
Hey, great to be on.
And now it's